When scientists use powerful telescopes to explore the vast night sky above the Earth, the sky that seafarers used to guide them long ago across the seas, one of the key characteristics they seek to find on other planets is traces of one of the most abundant compounds on Earth, covering over 70% of its surface, with over 95% of it in the deep waters of the ocean. And scientists use an assumption about what they know to exist here on Earth and project, based upon science, that it must necessarily follow that the laws of science exist here on Earth and do not cease to be immutable once one departs the Earth's atmosphere. These constants in the laws of nature are the very basis of what is called science. But it is often intriguing to discover that at the very beginning of creation, as recorded in the books of the Old Testament, men of faith who knew nothing about science stated specifically the conditions that precipitated the beginning of life on Earth as we know it today. Just like we look for certain things when we seek signs of life on other planets beyond in the stars. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. The image of waters recurs throughout many stories in the Bible, and not long after creation, Noah is found building an ark. Moses found adrift upon the waters as a babe and parting the seas as an older man. Jonah is found in the belly of a big fish. Even Jesus finds himself being baptized in the rivers of the Jordan, calming storms of fishermen on the seas of Galilee. And at least one devoted disciple is even found daring to jump overboard in great zeal to begin to walk upon the waters on the call of his name from his Lord. Man overboard, indeed. And these are the stories that are learned certainly in devotional worship through sermons and homilies, but also stories that become a part of our faith through fellowship. Activities like Sunday school, church camp, youth ministry, fellowship activities. And most familiar with seafaring tragedies know that even the unsinkable Titanic was found floundering in its last hours afloat before losing over 1,500 souls to the treacherous waves. Was found anxiously waiting for a fellowship, dare say even sister ship, called the Carpathia. Worship and fellowship go hand in hand. And summer church camp is not summer church camp without what? Without afternoon swimming in a large lake with the interruption of whistles sounding for your buddy check, your companion for even fun in the water that you trusted to pair with your buddy tag and placed on the big board on the beach before you began that summer fun in the water. And once the lifeguards were assured that everyone in the pool was raising their hand that was joined with their buddy next to them, everyone could then get back to their wet and wild adventures once again. Buddy check was fellowship at summer camp. Yet encouraging those communities of faith to avoid in-person devotional worship, the nation's only physician serving as a state governor has joined others to assure those persons in faith that their old ships of Zion, where they had once worshipped in times of calmer seas, will still be there after an indeterminate time when the pandemic crisis is over. And he, as well as others, remind all that God is ubiquitous or everywhere, so there is not need to be in a church focusing only upon the aspects of devotional worship that involve travel to a particular destination, yet in total disregard to the fellowship found upon arrival at that port of call. Maybe not quite drinking drinks with little umbrellas in them, but there is still a little bit of communion. Before fellowship, a word lost in the seas of pandemic, became indefinitely disrupted, perhaps by sheer coincidence. But at the beginning of the pandemic, a recurring story playing out around the world were the stories of luxury cruise ships and even mighty warships where infection outbreaks had taken hold. Ships on odyssey journeys denied entry at port after port, passengers adrift on the deep blue seas, lulled into a dreamlike state by its beauty, often unaware of the larger changing world around them, casually treating the changes in their itineraries and still looking forward to unplanned adventures in alternative ports of call. But the sailors for centuries, the alluring appeal of the sea has always been matched in complement to its more foreboding dangers hidden beneath the waves. Along with the siren's call, Scylla and Charybdis, or after a sudden squall changed pleasant weather to turbulent storms. Intriguingly, during the tales of seafaring voyagers, the stories about cruise ships were transformed into narratives about voyages of the damned, with some wondering if they might ever be permitted to port, denied entry because they had an infection. While the tales of at least one battleship, essential workers, and its captain sending out an SOS call for his essential sailors, which captured the attention of the world within days, found safety ashore from all alarm. Even before the beginning of the pandemic, the indefinite closings of places of worship, many news reports discussed the story regarding the decline in church memberships, despite around 78% of Americans identifying themselves in membership in a Christian fellowship denomination, with less than half engaging in regular devotional worship at least once per month. And by December, before the pandemic was known, at least by Pew Research Center's Religious Repression Project, an interesting name, that over 318,000 Christian churches, only about 60,000 were equipped with sufficient lifeboats to survive an unprecedented pandemic crisis in virtual worship, because they lacked an online capability. That's about 1/5 of the Christian churches that perhaps, like the Titanic, believed they were unsinkable. But like ships made of iron, will to a mathematical certainty sink. When the waters receded and the lockdowns, 1 in 5 churches had perished in the flood. 1 in 5 persons who may have thought they had the faith of Peter, when the church doors closed, decided they were not going to come back until the pandemic is over. And if you're looking at this problem of closed places of worship, failures to anticipate contingencies and plan for provisions in a business school, perhaps as a case study, this would probably be considered in an organization theory class as a problem of a failure in fellowship, perhaps in part. Certainly, there may be some in the membership with these types of skills who could have answered the call, who may have been better prepared if there existed some type of mentorship for continuity purposes, because no members live forever, but also for contingency purposes, because sometimes pandemic crises do come up. Or folks not called to the ministry at the moment, but rather in a call waiting for the call to say, I am ready. But most would examine the impact of the consequences for closing places of worship as a problem arising from what kind of ship? Leadership. And immediately noticing that there may have been some talents with untapped potential that were not even asked during a pandemic to assist in performing tasks like developing an online capability, pursuing legal strategies to ensure that the government had not overextended its reach in regulation, as only now is becoming apparent that it did, even by the words of the Supreme Court, developing internal plans and strategies for reducing the risks of infection rather than waiting upon another government order to tell you exactly what to do, or operating like many essential businesses were actually permitted to do. And if we did an after-action review, attempting to examine possible causes that created this dilemma for a structural analysis, it is certain that nobody in seminary learns about essential business operations in seminary. There is no pandemic crisis preparation class for preachers before a pandemic occurs. But being reflective upon their experiences, those pastors who have had pastoral training may be able to delve further to analyze how a pandemic wave came aboard, or how weekly devotional worship got stuck on a sandbar, or how the routine of devotional worship in person suddenly in the middle of the night collided with an iceberg of technology improvements that were on the bucket list, but which the church never got around to beginning. And they might see this in pastoral perspective like the Maslow hierarchy of needs, finding those subsistence needs of the church taking greater precedence than any of the other needs that might arise on a higher order, forcing pastors away from the role of leadership, already behind the curve on evangelical discipleship, finding it too late to address mentorship, panicked about fiscal concerns related to impacted membership, and sending down to the bottom of the list of any concerns about fellowship, because pandemic became the big problem in the front window, capturing all attention and forcing pastors to react, not manage the crisis. And there is actually an interesting movie back in the early days of disaster films, Irwin Allen's Poseidon Adventure. It tells the story of a pastor prepared for the worst disaster, even if the entire world had turned upside down, as indeed it did for Gene Hackman, who played the role of a chaplain, a cruise line chaplain, seasonal chaplain, Reverend Scott, on a New Year's Eve cruise that was bound for some exotic destination before tragedy struck in the form of a 30-foot tidal wave set off by seismic activity, talk about unprecedented, beneath the waves, that caught even the captain of the ship unprepared as he turned the large cruise ship to the best angle of attack for the giant tidal wave to capsize the entire ship. In the movie, most of the passengers had gathered in the grand ballroom aboard the ship to ring in the new year and sing Old Lang Syne. And Gene Hackman here portrays an intriguing role that is not revealed to most in fuller context until the exciting conclusion of the film. Yet another one of those instances, perhaps, where the book was far better than the movie. But one thing that is pretty clear in the film is that Gene Hackman wants to be aboard the ship, like anyone else wants to take a luxury cruise during the holidays, but he is not feeling totally fulfilled, really satisfied in his choice of profession and his job. And especially at the end, where he ends up sacrificing his life to save others he has led all the way to the end, Hackman's character still has some unresolved issues with God. Big issues. But there's one pivotal scene in the film after Gene Hackman, or Reverend Scott, has left the capsized ballroom, leading his party to climb the fallen Christmas tree, to begin a quest to seek the hull at what was formerly the bottom of the ship, where he believed they might find the places. He's thinking he's using science where the metal was thinnest for a rescue crew with a drill or torch to breach iron skin. Were about midway on the journey, Reverend Scott, just a seasonal employee on a limited gig to provide chaplain services to passengers until he reached his destination to go and boogie or whatever he planned to do where he was going, he encounters a full-time employed ship steward in full uniform leading a party of passengers to rescue, but headed the other way, towards that which was formerly the top of the cruise ship that was now underwater. This is an intriguing moment in the film because Irwin Allen specifically chose the character of a ship steward engaged in his daily duties of stewardship. A task that even many faith leaders and pastors decided to focus upon during a pandemic crisis and have dedicated themselves to continue until the pandemic crisis is over, perhaps after a sufficient amount of prayer, and the pandemic will be over. But the ship steward engaged in his daily duties of stewardship is presented with one flaw that Gene Hackman, as Reverend Scott, cannot find a way to preach a sermon that the steward might understand as to why what he's doing is not working, as to why he could not continue to act like everything was normal and simply focus on doing the things that he was accustomed to do in doing his daily job until the ship became right again, without recognizing the overwhelming reality that the entire ship had turned upside down, making more change than was going through his mind a necessity for his survival. And at least from the perspective of character development, Reverend Scott, played by Gene Hackman, may have had the greatest motivation to lead passengers aboard the capsized ship, because his life was not wrapped up on that ship. He was only working on a work vacation. He had not become inured by long-suffered habits or had time to develop a routine. He had no dying allegiance to that ship. And even in his relationship with God, as well as his satisfaction with his life's chosen profession and job, he was always asking himself the hard question: how the heck do I get out of here? Creating his own evolutionary pressure and making him more inclined to analyze situations presented to him and manage his way through crisis, rather than to react and let that crisis manage him. And so, if your worship, membership, discipleship, mentorship, and stewardship appear to be just a little bit upside down in pandemic crisis in leadership, you may want to consider the possibility that your ship has actually been turned upside down, and addressing that problem has become your priority. If you want to get right with God and avoid perishing beneath the rushing waves. Or you can continue to sail steady as she goes. Bon voyage. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for governor of Virginia. I ask every Christian, every conservative, every Republican, every Democrat, every liberal, every conservative, and every Virginian and American true to like the motto of the imagery: follow me and we shall overcome. Honest. And y'all come back now. Yeah.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.